everybody. I'm so glad that you can make it tonight. This is the Center for Railroad Photography and Arts monthly Zoom program for February 2025. I'm very pleased you're joining us for this evening to celebrate our combined love of trains. Tell us in the chat where you're joining us from. We love seeing the many places around the world that our audience members are located. My name is Lisa Hardy, and I am the Program Administrator for the Center for Railroad Photography and Art. And yes, I love trains. Because you're joining us tonight, I would have to imagine that you do too. I won't get all mushy and poetic, but I will say that our presenters help me fall in love with trains even more. To begin tonight, I'd like to mention a couple of housekeeping items. We use Zoom webinar for our presentations. This means that audience members do not have access to their personal audio or camera during the event. Please use the Q&A icon to submit any questions. Following the main presentation and time permitting, we will be hosting a Q&A session. If you have a question at any point during tonight's presentation, make sure you post it in the Q&A, not the chat, to ensure that we can see it. You may have seen this image recently on our social media. I couldn't help but use it again. It is the perfect train photograph from our collection for February, and it was taken by John Bjorklund in February 1984. It was meant to be. This red Ann Arbor Railroad alkyl diesel locomotive with billowing black smoke, prominently showcased here, surrounded by red and white cars on either side. That's just train Valentine's Day imagery at its best. Even the smoke is making half a heart. Okay, I see some eyes rolling. I'll move on. Our mission is to preserve and present significant images of railroading. To fulfill this mission, we have a number of programs that include online programming like tonight's presentation, our annual conference, traveling exhibitions, our annual photography competition named for our founder called the John E. Gruber Creative Photography Awards Program, publications that include books, and our quarterly journal called Railroad Heritage. The second issue for 2025 should be hitting mailboxes soon, and our Railroad Heritage Visual Archive. It is because of our members that we are able to offer this programming. If you haven't renewed your membership for 2025, consider this your friendly reminder. If you'd like to become a member, visit our website at www.railphoto-art.org/support for more information. We would love to have you join us for our members-only exclusive programming. In fact, our next members-only Zoom program will be happening on March 11th, 2025. CRP&A staff members Adrian Evan and Jordan Craig will be giving our members the chance to see the newest addition to the John Gruber collection, portraits and stereographs produced in specially equipped rail photo cars in the late 19th and early 20th century. John Gruber was fascinated with what he called rolling studios and researched, collected, and even published multiple times about rail photo cars. You're going to love what Adrian and Jordan have found and their insights into this collection. Register today. We would not be able to offer programs like tonight and our upcoming program in March without the support of our members. Truly, our members are the engine that allows us to continue our work at the center. We are so grateful for your generous support. Smoke is the theme of our 2025 Photography Awards program. This photograph by Robert Hadley shows just how dramatic smoke can be on a frigid afternoon in 1946 as this eastbound New York Central passenger train runs from Chicago to Detroit. I look forward to seeing your creative take on this theme. More information can be found about the theme and the submission process on our website at www.railphoto-art.org/awards/smoke. Registration is filling up for our annual conference. If you would like to join us in Milwaukee on May 16th and Lake Forest College on May 17th and 18th in Lake Forest, Illinois, we would love to have you join us. Visit our website at www.railphoto-art.org/conferences to register, see a list of presenters, and more. We also have a special program that provides conference scholarships for young railroad photographers. The deadline to submit is February 28th, 2025. We have had some exceptional scholarship awardees in the past and are excited to provide this incredible opportunity to new and upcoming railroad photographers. If you know someone who might be interested, please have them visit our website at www.railphoto-art.org/conferences. Click on Conference Scholarships tab for the application submission information. Okay, let's get to why we're here tonight. On Saturday evening, June 15th, 2024, I found myself in Lake Forest College in Illinois at my first CRPNA conference. After selecting food for dinner, I entered the vast expanse of Calvin Durand Hall at Lake Forest College. I remember well the sounds of laughter and genuine conversations filling the expansive space. It was a moment, like so many films have portrayed, that familiar walk into the school cafeteria and having no idea who to sit by. I first looked around for anyone I might know, but as this was my first conference, the list was small. Gathering my courage, I saw a couple of seats open at a table and asked, "Are these seats open?" Not missing a beat, Chip and Leslie Savoye, who were sitting across from the empty seats, smiled and graciously invited me to sit down. What happened next has been imprinted on my brain and heart ever since. I learned that Chip and Leslie both loved trains and had worked in the industry for many years. Chip shared with me photos of Leslie, proving that she was the first female locomotive engineer for the Chicago and Northwestern. I told Leslie that she was my hero. I also found we both had connections to the Southwest. Truly, from the moment I met the Savoys, I've been a huge fan. In August, I told Scott Lodes that I thought a Zoom program by the Savoys in February 2025 could be called I Love Trains. It's finally happening, and I'm thrilled to introduce all of you to my friends Chip and Leslie. Leslie holds groundbreaking achievements in the railroad industry. She was the first female locomotive engineer for the Chicago and Northwestern, and later became the first female road foreman for Amtrak. Over her distinguished career, Leslie worked for 9 different railroads. Chip began as a locomotive engineer for Penn Central and Conrail and advanced through various leadership roles, including road foreman, trainmaster, superintendent, director, and vice president of operations. Today, they are principals at Iron Horse Consulting, LLC, where they provide professional transportation services to the railroad industry. Breeders of dual champion wire hair dash hounds, Chip and Leslie love travel, sports, tennis, biking, and of course, railroad photography. Chip and Leslie, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Let me see if we can get our screen shared, okay?
Okay.
How's that look?
Looks great. Chip, go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. Scott, I know you're out there. L, I think is there as well. Thank you so much for having us. We're really quite honored. Um, we just see ourselves as a couple of railroaders that happen to have camera, and I don't know if any of our work will ever hang in a gallery in New York someplace. But I kind of liken this presentation to maybe a photo album on a coffee table that we can kind of thumb through and laugh at things and point out some of the times along the way that have meant something very special to us. So I'll let you kind of go through the program, okay?
Greetings, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here and you could join us. Our program tonight is going to be our introduction, Chips and my spiritual connection, all the friends and fellow colleagues that we have met along the way, our early years, our meeting, our first date, our marriage and our relocation to Michigan, our professional years, some of our adventures together, some of our favorite photos that span over 30 years ago, and the conclusion, and then questions and answers.
I will say that every single slide has trains in it, so don't worry that this is going to become a personal photo display of our family. The picture on this slide is a 706 signal on the Raton sub, and that crow's nest kind of demonstrates where Leslie and I are today. We like to just set up, relax, and watch the world go by. Just real quickly, we do have other loves to our dogs, for instance. That's Lena in the middle right there. We just lost her. It's been a really kind of a tough go, but we're proud of her and the alert she put out. We do field trials with the dogs, and of course, we're sports fanatics as well. How Kansas City got in there, I don't know, but I will forgive Leslie for rooting for them and beating my Niners. The plane just demonstrates our love of travel. If any of you have landed at SFO in good weather, you often land, have parallel runways, and it's really cool because often a big jet will pull up right next to you and you land in parallel, which is what we got here with the Salesforce Tower there in the background. We'll go into our spiritual connections. This is not going to be a religious discussion by any means, but Les and I, as we got to know each other, realized we were connected at a much deeper level than just, trains and friends and things like that. And I kind of researched a little bit of, spirituality and connectivity, and came across this quote from Reddy Brown, who's a academic and a scholar down in Texas. And I think if you think about this, this applies to everybody that is interested in railroading and throughout life. But we recognize and celebrate that we're inextricably connected to each other by power greater than all of us. And I sent this picture to Leslie when we first started dating because I took this at 14 years old. My first trip down south with older friends, they drove us. We ran like heck to the Narrows and the overpass there at on the Santa Fe, just west of Victorville, and caught the chief at sunrise. And for me, it was the dawning of my, leaving my adolescence and becoming a young adult, realizing what I wanted to do in my life. And I never saw the chief again. This was the only one.
Yeah.
And for Leslie, the chief meant something as well.
Yeah, the chief was, ingrained in my heart and soul. My maternal, I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My maternal grandparents lived in Chicago, so we rode this train and the El Cap from Lamy, New Mexico to Chicago twice a year. And when Chip sent me this picture on the internet shortly after we met, I broke into tears, and as if he was taking this photo for me. And
So, thinking about that deep connection, I started looking through our slide collection, which is, I'm not going to say as enormous as other folks on this Zoom call, but it's big. And I started finding shots where she and I had not known each other, but were virtually the same location. And some of the stuff just blew me away. The picture on the lower left is at Port Chicago before the Navy closed it off. You can't get in there anymore. And the picture on the upper right was taken in the late 80s by Leslie. Mine was in the late 70s before we left for the East Coast. Again, these next couple slides are showing, our connection through railroading. We also would go back east. When I was back there working, I'd take the kids every summer or fall to Horseshoe Curve. I found this one. I took the one on the left sometime in the early 90s when I was stationed in Allentown. And Leslie took us in the fall '88 when she was back on the right, when she was back training for Amtrak.
road foreman school.
And you had to hike into this place, and we were standing in virtually the same spot. By the way, I had 20 slides I went through of similar. I had to narrow down to one or two. But this one really blew me away. Before, what do you call them, date nails? I always call them tie tats.
They're date nails.
But these are birthday years. Leslie took her own there at 57. And before we even met, she took that 1954, which is my birthday year. That kind of freaked me out. I just kind of demonstrates the connectivity that we had between each other. But you can talk about the spiritual connection, but a lot of it boils down to friends. And we've met some friends along the way, too many to actually mention. But we want to name a few of the folks we hang out with, and I'll turn it over to Les.
Yeah, dear friends Elle and Laura Lawrence, Ted and Shirley Benson. We ran into them on on Glorietta Sub. We call them our posse, Dick Dorn, Doug Watts, James Schlinger, Chip, and Metal Mike Hare, of course, Scott Lowe's and Larry DeYoung, Paul Greenfield, and who can forget Mark Lanuza,
Yeah,
who we met in Chappelle, New Mexico, and
basically fell down a hill right in our laps, and we've known him ever since. Great guy. In terms of Scott and Larry, we belong to another historical group, and Larry is part of that Conrail connection that
that's right.
connects Leslie and myself. But we'll bring that up right now, and I'll let Leslie talk about that.
Yeah, the most profound connection that we have is Douglas Watts. Doug and I have been friends for well over 50 years. He was on one of my tours when I was a tour director for Amtrak in the mid 70s, and we have kept our connection. And he was an ex-con, of whom up in the upper left, the photo is Doug, Bob Davis, Steve Solomon, and Larry DeYoung on one of our photo adventures. But I was single, and every man I'd call Douglas about, he was like, "Oh, he's no good. He's not any good anyway." So I called him about Chip, and he said, "Oh, Chip, he's a great guy. He's wonderful." And of course, I was like, "Oh no, oh my gosh." And as soon as after I met Chip in an exploratory job interview, it's like, I knew I was going to marry him. It was
been together ever since.
Yeah, we've been together ever since. So
ironically, this Conrail connection, the upper left, I know those guys and work with a lot of them in the auto group. Didn't even know anything about Leslie, and Doug and I, God, I can't remember. It was in the
1985.
mid 80s, 85.
It was 1985.
Yeah. Came to Allentown as a trainee, and I had him on the hump, and got to show him the ropes on what we do as a hump trainmaster, which is pull your hair out most of the time.
So hence the spiritual connection on many levels.
But we'd be remiss if not bringing this guy into the discussion. Les, go ahead.
Yeah, Dick Steinheimer has been a major influence, not only as a photographer, but as a human being in my life. Life lessons. There's no greater human being than Dick, and of course Shirley. I did many projects with him when I was a road foreman with Amtrak, and Douglas and I had we're blessed to be able to study with him both on Donner and on Tehachapi. And I think you talk about another spiritual connection. This man taught me so many lessons, photography wise as well as life lessons.
One story I had about Dick: when I was a kid, I'd see his stuff in trains along with Ted Benson's, and so I was just in awe of what they could do with black and white, and Dick Dorn stuff too. But fast forward about 20 years later, and I'm the assistant superintendent on the Philly division, and I'm in the conference room working. I was basically running a dispatcher's office, and Christine Wagner, who was the director of our public corporate communications, who was a former newscaster locally there in Philly, called me. Says, "Hey, I got a railroad photographer who's taking pictures up on the river line. I wanted to know about any, getting a lineup from you. Can I put him with you? Connect him in?" I go, "Yeah, sure." So she clicks off, and the voice of the other one is this deep, raspy, "Hello, Chip." "Yes, this is Chip Savoye. This is Dick Steinheimer." And I'm usually not speechless, but I couldn't say a word. I was like this lump in my throat. I was trying to clear, and he goes, "Hello, hello." "Hey, I'm here, Dick. I'm here." And I was totally awestruck. At that point, I gave him the hotline number for the general manager and told him, if you need anything, call me and I'll tell you where the trains are. And for the next 3 days, he bounced around between the river line at Bear Mountain and the Harrisburg terminal. And of course, thank God the general manager wasn't calling to try to ask me why his line was busy all the time. Somehow I escaped that one. So we'll move on to the next subject, our early years. I'll go through this real quick. I grew up in Walnut Creek when there was actually a San Ramon branch and not an Iron Horse Trail. And we as kids, I think I was 15 at the time, we'd often hang out at the depot because they're cruising for beans. And Al Williams was the engineer. He's there in the center. And really mentored us, you know, in terms of safety and hanging out and not doing stupid things around the rail. And he would start telling stories because he would go up on, I want to say it was the city of San Francisco, over into Reno and Sparks in the summer, and then spend the winter on the local. And he, you know, those several of us, Bob Rochelle, the Magazine Brothers, and he said, "Hey, whatever you do, don't go on the railroad. It's an awful job, you know." But he would just keep talking about it, and every one of us ended up on the railroad in one way, shape, or form. So we owed a lot to Al. We soon found out what Martinez was, and that kind of became our hangout. Double track main line, so there's a big power, ST-45s, train orders, passenger. I mean, had everything. And why our parents let us hang out there, I'll never know. I don't think I'd do that these days, but just a couple sample shots of our time there. And of course, when we got our driver's license off to Stockton, we went Roseville, Sacramento, places like that. That's the Chief's power backing down on the train at Richmond, the Chief at Stockton Tower in lower right. And of course, the Zephyr was off at the time, and the F started showing up. Got TOF, I think it was, maybe out of Oakland. And who could forget the inside gateway trains coming into and out of Stockton with Alco SP&Ss? Oh my God, that was awesome. Anyway, and then so we'll move to Les's early years.
Yes, as I mentioned, I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the upper left is an Amtrak train, number 3, going to Los Angeles, and the bottom left is the depot at Lamy, New Mexico. The upper right is the depot at Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hadn't seen it. It now houses the rail runner that runs between Belen, New Mexico, and Santa Fe. And this is the park in Lamy on the bottom
Kind of
right.
where you got
This is
interested in
where,
the
yes,
Chief
this
and
is
all
where
that stuff.
yeah, we'd get on the Chief, and I'd sit there and near the window and watch the Mars light rolling through Apache Canyon, and just know that that's what I wanted to do
But
in my life.
eventually life took you to Chicago,
That's
right?
right. That's right. That's right.
And Grandma's house was a couple blocks from the harbor or
Yeah,
something?
my when we had an apartment right next to the IHB when my father was attending law school, and I'd leave the apartment and walk the block down and watch the Indiana Harbor Belt, and then my grandmother lived in LaGrange, very, this happened to be Hinsdale, but my grandmother lived very close to LaGrange, and I spent a lot of years the triple track racetrack hanging out in LaGrange, watching the trains, and it was awesome. On the right side is a shot of the left side is a shot of Proviso, and on the right side is the Santa Fe 80 East Jackson headquarters with the Sears Tower in the back.
And where's that Santa Fe sign? Right
It
now?
is at the Illinois Railroad Museum.
Yep.
Thank goodness. And rest its soul, the C&NW passenger station in downtown Chicago, which is no longer with us, and the corporate offices of the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, which also isn't there anymore.
But you also kind of like planes too, huh?
Yeah, we're kind of all transportation geeks, and of course the Milwaukee Road, you know, what can I say? But Bensonville, you know, you can't go wrong with O'Hare and Bensonville. So I spent a lot of time hanging out by the Milwaukee, you know, searchlight signals and airplanes. So
So this next one is really about you, but I'd like to tell a story.
I know.
And I think Bruno Berzins took these shots.
Yes, Bruno was a great guy. I worked with him on the Chicago Northwestern. He and I were hired. Well, he hired out before me, but we were brakemen together.
I worked a lot of freights that had cabooses and flagmen, and the flagmen generally have their own
They're a breed of they're a breed of their own.
So I'm looking at this picture in the slide rack, and I see him looking at. He must be looking at Leslie or something. And it's like, Tyler, haven't you ever seen a female, rail fan?
And the other guy with the smirk on his face.
Yeah,
That's
the
pretty
conductor
funny.
with a smirk. Yeah. And so I keep going down the box, and I see the next one. Well, of course they're looking at Leslie. And I've got a halter top, no safety gear on.
Well, we
And-
didn't have that.
Oh, that's right. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. And so I looked at the caboose, this Milwaukee caboose, and I blew it up because look at the flagman. Typical flagman. Sorry.
I forgot about that.
You forgot
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. But
Uh,
thank you, Bruno.
Yeah. So anyway, we had our first date after I moved to Michigan and was working for Union Pacific subsidiary. But I brought Les out, and our first date was at Fostoria and the Iron Triangle.
Yeah, what woman wouldn't want to go to Fostoria for their first date? Come on, really?
So I mean, we spent some time there, and got some night shots DNS, and this was prior to PSR, and you just have to turn your head, and there'd be somebody going by either north, south, east, west on the B&O or the NS side.
Yeah.
But so we got a road railer shot, which it doesn't exist anymore. Les got the one on the left, and I got some of the old C&O signals there coming by F Tower. But of course, we didn't stop there. We went out to Deschler and Attica and ended up at Marion. And I said, well, why don't we do the whole romantic thing and go up to Niagara? So we did the obligatory Niagara Falls shot.
Yeah,
And Les got impatient and said,
That's enough.
That's enough. I want to go to Hamilton Junction, which is where we ended up. Hamilton Junction is the old Toronto, Hamilton, Buffalo on the left. I want to say it's CP and CN now. I can't remember. So anyway, VIA comes in there, and we ended up at Denfield Road, which is where the CP and CN come out of New London on the west side. That's the CP on the right, and a VIA train, I think, coming out of Windsor. I'm not positive. We're pretty bad at labeling our slides, everyone. Sorry.
very bad.
So then we got married, and the only reason I wanted to show you this was I kind of stood Leslie up at the altar. That's my pastor, Holly, and I stopped the ceremony to give a roll by to a Caltrans train, and she's still there. She said, okay, no problem. I'll go get my picture taken, and then we resumed things after the train went by. But we did a quick ceremony at the depot there in Martinez, which is where we both hung out as youngsters.
And we had Fritz. Fritz was our best man, and Lorelei was our maid of honor.
Up in the upper left.
Upper left. So
Despite saying she'd never leave California, she did come to Michigan, and we spent a few years there until a job opened up on the west. And we ended up at Romulus, which is where the C&O crosses the old NS, and there was a way to get a plane landing on the runway there at Metro Airport. And then when we had dog shows out on the west side of Michigan, we'd head down towards Elkhart and Butler. Butler's a cool place because you got the NS crossing and the CPS trackage rights now. So it's a pretty busy little place.
Mhm.
And then we ended up, Edgerton and Butler were always a cool place to see them on the Toledo straight line. But our happy place turned out to be Butler, Port Huron. And it was only about 25, well, I guess it was half hour from our house. And what was cool for a couple of railroad people is we'd sit there, and these eastbounds would come out of Port Huron, third, fourth notch, and they just leave it that way. The engine leave it that way because you drop down a very steep grade into the bore of Sarnia's tunnels, the Port Huron tunnels. And you could just see the cars picking up speed to the point when about 80 cars was by you, the slack would run in and it would just create this huge bang.
Yeah, yeah, huge run-in. It was
These
great.
were the days of no cabooses.
Yeah.
And conversely, the same was true on the westbounds would come roaring out at 50 or 55, just shut the throttle off, and they just use the hill to slow them down. So by the time the rear end cleared, he was doing maybe about 8 or 9 miles an hour, pull up to this crew change at the
Yeah.
west end, and away they went. So we'll move into the professional years. I picked this slide because it's pretty appropriate of the way our marriage is right now. Leslie is a C&W employee, is got the lead locomotive and leads this marriage, controls the train, and me as a Conrail, 3 units provides the muscle and the horsepower.
That's right.
And I'm not going to argue with that.
No, me neither.
Unless you want to talk a little bit about your career.
Yeah, these two images were taken professionally. The one on the left is when I started in 1976. One of the engineers, Dallas Miller, I worked with in Proviso, he took this photo of me, and I showed it to my mother, and she goes, "Yeah, you look like a boy." So I was, "Oh, thanks, Mom." And the second one, and the one on the right, was professionally done, and it was for a publication in South Africa. And that was taken at the Proviso diesel shop, obviously in the days of when we had steam.
But you also spent a few days on the
And
hump
I
as well.
spent
Huh?
a few days on the hump. The first job I had was a midnight job, pulling pins on a job which was called Sputnik, and which was kind of funny. But yeah, spent a lot of time. And of course, all this is now non-existent, unfortunately.
And when you got on the road firing, you had a little situation.
Yeah. I got on the road, firing, learning in Illinois division. So I decided I was, in training at the time. So I told the engineer, I said, "Hey, do you mind? We're stopped. Do you mind if I jump down and get a quick picture?" And he says, "I really don't care what you do, kid, but as soon as that signal turns green, I'm leaving with or without you." So I'm glad I did. It was a nice
Yeah, turned out
image.
to be nice.
Yeah.
Got a Falcon going.
Yeah.
So tell us about the first woman engineer here.
Okay. Another another close friend, Tom Schultz. I met. We were sitting at a mechanical group dinner in downtown Chicago, and we were having a conversation, and lo and behold, there was a gentleman from Wabco that was sitting adjacent to us, and he overheard our conversation and said, "Really? You're an engineer? Really?" And we said yes, and he said, "Hey, would you mind if we did an ad about you?" And I said, "Absolutely not. No, I'd be I'd be open to doing that." Well, this here it is. They did a centerfold, probably the only single one that I'll ever do in my life, and they did a centerfold, and it was in railway age and modern railroads, and so it was pretty.
The ironic part about this was published when the 80s.
Yes, late 70s,
Yeah, it was before
early
I ever-
80s. Yeah.
And I saw this ad. I still remember it. And I said, "Man, why can't I meet a rail fan?" And here we are. Now, that's another example of one of our, spiritual connections. It's just crazy.
Yes. And more Proviso stories. This is not graffiti. We all, ever since, is "Where is Herbie?" or they had all kinds of pre spray paint graffiti. We had a lot of us had our signs that we draw on box cars and tank cars and such. And the one on the left was mine. This happened to be from my days on the SP. but here was also Bruno's, the middle one, and Proviso, and that my graphic art turned into our logo for our kennel name, which is up on the upper right. And then here's another picture of the bold tracks and Proviso on the right.
But at one point in time, you made a decision, your love was out west.
Yes,
and out you came, huh?
yes. I decided I'm from the West and I needed to be back out west, and I applied in San Francisco on one market and was hired by the Southern Pacific. And
Could you just clarify, everybody, this is not how you showed up for work?
this
on
is
the
not
SB?
how I showed up for work. The gentleman who's a professional photographer, Dallas Miller, wanted to photograph me and suggested I did do that with all my native Navajo jewelry. And I was,
You
I
did?
was, I was like, oh, okay.
And life led you to the
And
front.
life led me to the friendly, and that it was on the left is my fireman's class. I had to go back through training, even though I was a promoted engineer. That's our fireman's class in Roseville, and this is a picture of the folks in the yard office in Oakland. A cast of characters that.
I would have turned around and walked out.
They were a great group. They're great guys, really.
Just some random shots of Les here.
Yeah, this was leaving Roseville on a turn back to Oakland, or was it Shelville, or I'm not sure. Upper right is Mike McGarvey at Martinez. On the bottom left was a Western Division special train, a Western Division employee appreciation train. That locomotive is in the California State Railway Museum. And on the bottom right is the Carquinez Bridge, the Benicia Bridge before the highway was put in, and you had really good access of.
But one of your highlights of your fireman's career.
One of my highlights of my fireman's career on the SP in 1980, I was by union rule, they had to call a fireman, and the SP, we were called in reverse order. So I was the token fireman on the 4449 and for the opening of the California State Railway Museum in Sacramento. And that was really a great experience.
On to Amtrak.
And then I was on to Amtrak as road foreman of engines out of Oakland. There was no I in team. It was all hands on deck. The train was late leaving Martinez, so we, everybody, worked hard to get the train moving. The picture on the right on the 501 was the launching of the Capitol Corridor service, and here we are in Jack London Square on the head end of the very, very first Capitol corridor.
Did you launch it from Sacramento? Did it come, the first trains go Sacramento west to
Yeah,
Oakland?
into
Okay.
Oakland, yes.
Which would explain this.
Yes,
Yeah.
and here's Shirley and I, photo Shirley Berman, photo taken by Stein of the first train leaving of the first Capitol leaving Sacramento, and here I am at the controls of that train.
A couple shots of your.
And here's a couple of shots. Here's number 12 in San Luis Obispo, needing a little extra power freight locomotive, and one of my very favorite locomotives up on Donner, SDP 40F.
Which I screwed up on. I forgot to put the F in there.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay. This is the upper left are the F69 PHACs. I'm very, very proud of that. I was tasked to launch the service, the first AC technology. I was assigned to test those locomotives all over the country for Amtrak with Ed Lombardi and a group of folks from Siemens and EMD. Um, that was the precursor to all of the AC locomotives that are out running right now. And that was a very fun and groundbreaking assignment. The bottom left was us, number 5 meeting number 6 up on the mountain. And the picture on the right was one of Stein's photos of a calendar shoot at Pinole. And that was done with Mr. Gosney as the assigned engineer on the job. And those were really great and fun times, but there were some not so glorious times. Immense sorrow during my tenure as a road foreman. There was a horrific crash on the San Joaquins, which killed a very, very two former coastal guys, Rich Barrow and Mike Passarelli. They couldn't see past the sand fill on that F40, and they struck a overloaded Hershey truck, and it was like hitting a brick wall. And they were both killed instantly, and it was very, very, very tragic. And but on this the image on the right, I mean, there was a lot of really fun and camaraderie and really, really great times together.
I'll move over to my career. I hired on the Penn Central, and after I was after leaving California in '71, I hired out in '74, and to see the decrepit nature of the road was just shocking to me. That's the river line on the left, lower left, and the upper right, which was basically 132-mile division. Top speed was 40 for 6 miles. The rest was 30, and it was 15 10-mile-an-hour slow orders, mostly at the control points. So it took TV9, which is the UPS train, a good 6 hours nonstop to run the division, and everybody else went in the clear for him, and usually outlawed. It took 2 crews usually to come south. I want to tell a quick story about the engines on the lower right. That's Weehawken back in 1974 on my first day on the job, and I was there to learn from one of the hostlers on how to move engines around. And of course, I put the reverser in upside down, and I'm switching the engine, and this reverser falls out, and I couple up at about 3 miles an hour, and all the units bounce up and down. The yard office was just to the right, and the window swung open on the trainmaster's window, and it was Joe Plagesi, who was the trainmaster, and he was a character. He was right out of Bayonne and a character out of The Sopranos, as far as I was concerned. Had the accent, cigarette hanging out of his mouth, move up and down when he talks. And he starts screaming, get up here right now. And I go, oh, God, first day on the job, I'm fired already. So he says, you're never going to make it here, kid. You better be more careful. Yes, Mr. Plagesi, I will. So fast forward 12 years, I'm now the district superintendent in North Jersey, and in comes walking Joe Plagesi to the first staff meeting, and he looks at me, he says, I hope you learned a few things since that day in Weehawken. And I responded, yes, Mr. Plagesi, I have. And he turned out to be one of the best train masters ever in North Jersey that I worked with. Great guy. This is kind of just a transition slide. We loved our E units and our executive train. That's the Bethlehem Steel Plant. I was a road foreman at the time in Allentown. But I got called for a problem out on the Harrisburg division. I was the closest one. The movement director says, "Hey, the crew can't find your train." I said, "How do you not find your train?" Well, I get up there and they couldn't find it. It was like dark, foggy, and they didn't know where their train was. And when they got to be late, I could understand why. This was the Reading Belt between just short of the CP Belt and Wyomissing Junction. It used to run on top of a quarry which collapsed, and that's the ENBE, which used to take steel to Bethlehem Steel. And I only show this because Conrail really had to be nimble, and this was an example of how quickly they responded. Reading, we had closed the Reading main, which came out of Center and up to Blandon on the main line because it was 2%, and the low grade was about 0.5%. But within a day, that railroad was back in service at 30 miles an hour with a helper district assigned. They got the local chairman in and they all signed off. And we were running our ore trains up that grade with 3 SD40s on the rear shoving. So it took about 2 months to get this thing back in service again. And I went by there one time a couple of years ago and you can't tell any difference. But my favorite division was the Mohawk Hudson. And we ran intermodal after intermodal in the morning. TVLA on the left was handed off directly to the Santa Fe and off to Los Angeles and went. And TV9's there on the right coming into Big Nose Curve at Yost. But I was really impressionable young fireman and got qualified out there and made some really, really fast trips. We could make the 150 miles in about 3 hours. 3 hours and a half, and with the piggyback trains, it was a little bit less. But Les,
Yeah, I was in my professional career over the years. I have been blessed and fortunate to be both a provider and a purchaser of transportation services, and I can tell you that of all the carriers, for premium intermodal, Conrail was number one by far. They did an incredible job with intermodal and containerized freight, followed by the Santa Fe. But yes, we really missed when Conrail went away.
So I finished out my career as a vice president of Richmond Pacific. Operation sounds really impressive, but basically I was a jitney driver, clerk, made coffee in the morning, decided what crews and customers we were going to do, had to manage the Union Pacific, which was probably the biggest challenge I've ever had. But we ran a lot of coal, carbon fuels, and things like that to export at Levin terminals. It was a fun job. I really, really enjoyed it. But part of the problem was with the city and the air quality management district was all over us to get tier 4s, which I had to do. And unfortunately, the way the rules were, you'd have to scrap the SW1200s. And I did not get a very warm reception when I told this to Les, because she actually worked at Par Terminal Railroad, which was the predecessor to the Richmond Pacific. So when I told her I had to scrap it, I said, "Well, but we're going to make a guardhouse out of it."
Yeah.
Which really didn't go over very well.
No.
You did what?
Yeah, it wasn't happy.
It wasn't
Still
very
not.
happy. So moving on to some adventures together. This is just kind of the intro slide. We've seen everything from cowboys at
Waldo
Waldo
Canyon.
Canyon in New Mexico, cattle drives up on 17 out of Coombers Pass. We've had our puppies together, so it's been quite an adventuresome time. But we spent probably since 2012.
Yeah,
A lot of time
probably 8 to 10 years of our life dedicated on
to the semaphores. And we have a little story we want to tell called the Gray Ghost. Our favorite location was 706 signal there on the lower left. But we ended up at signal 717, which is across the pasture. And Leslie goes, I have this really weird feeling I've been here before. And I'm going through the slides, and sure enough, she had. she got a picture of a York Canyon coal train back in the 80s when she was driving back out on the bottom, and she'd gotten a picture up above of number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have been there
Yeah, that's
before.
right. That's right.
So we had set up and, taken a few pictures and really liked the area. And Les was in the field if you look at the shot to the left, she was in the field kind of taking a broadside. And she had this awful feeling that she was being watched and something was hanging over
Yes.
her. And she turned around and our gray ghost appeared.
Yeah.
And that gray ghost was there every time we went up. And we kind of captioned it, "What are you doing in my field?"
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. And he gave us permission. He'd always hang with us.
Yeah, he was so sweet. He was so sweet. And every time we went there, I mean, he'd be on the other side of that field and he'd see me. He'd come running to visit, and
The peppermints help.
the peppermints and the carrots and the apples, and there were a couple other horses around there, and he'd shoo them away, and this is my person. He was so special. He really, really was.
So another story we have is the bull at
Yeah.
Chappelle. And Les and I were sitting in the house in Santa Fe watching the snow come down, and we said, we got to go out in the Glorietta. I mean, the snowstorm was really hitting the Glorietta Mesa. Maybe we can get a decent shot at Chappelle. So out we went, and I forgot her ladder. So I turn around, Leslie's a bit of a free spirit, if you could tell. I turn around, she's standing on top of the car. But we heard the rumblings of number 3 coming up through Tecolote Creek and Apache Springs, and pretty soon you can see the snow kind of just billowing around, and a little orange dot was in the middle. I go, God bless, I think we got a BNSF in the lead. So I started snapping away and got this of the pigeons and birds flying around.
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, we do." It just threw us back right to the Santa Fe days, but let's got the money shot, I thought. And with all that snow flying and semaphore dropping.
Yeah.
So once that went by, we were just high-fiving ourselves and we said, okay, let's go. And we ended up almost getting snowed in by the snowplow before
Yeah.
we ended up heading down to West Chappelle to get, Leslie got this picture of number 4 about an hour later.
Yeah, so I'm driving this is my Forerunner. So I'm driving my Forerunner, and there's a guy walking around, and I'm like, he's flagging me down, and he's like,
It's a cowboy.
yeah, he's a cowboy. Yeah, he's like, excuse me, have you seen my bull? Your bull? And I had seen him, and I said, he goes, this bull.
Yeah.
He's asking, yeah, he's walking around, and he's a young little guy, and I pointed him into the correct direction, and but that's kind of an odd thing to ask somebody in the middle of a blizzard.
Yeah. But that's our bull story.
Yeah, that's right. We're full of bull.
Yeah. But we'll move to one of our favorite places, and that's the Canadian Rockies. Phil Ghazi will probably enjoy this, but we spent some time on the Canadian roads on the CN portion. But Alessa and I spent some time at the Post Hotel there in Lake Louise, and made some trips over Kicking Horse Pass. That's the Icefield Parkway on the lower right, and Peyto Lake, and then I got a shot of an empty grainer coming up with Mount Stevens and Cathedral Peak in the background. But the story really is, I started in the early 70s. I got some shots of, one of those true CP, Lake Louise in the lower there westbound, and the eastbound coming over on the summit. And of course, the Canadian road, the CP side back in those days. And that's this Canadian coming around Morant's Curve. So I had a connection to it, and I told Leslie, I said, after her ultra, she was bragging about Switzerland and Europe, Alps, and all. I says, have you ever been to Canadian Rockies? She goes, no. I said, well, we need to go. It's probably one of the most beautiful places on earth. And sure enough, when she saw it, her jaw dropped. But we went on a railfan trip and ended up in Field. That's the one, I believe it's the 100 now. I think it was the train 102 at the time,
Yeah.
nonstop from, I shouldn't say nonstop, but basically Vancouver all the way to Toronto. And I was up at the control point taking that picture of an inbound train coming for a crew change with Stevens in the background. And I saw Les down at the crossing talking to the crew. I go, all right, I better go down and rescue that crew. But Leslie's gonna be talking her ear off. It turns out the engineer was the general chairman for the Canadian Pacific Lines West and had nothing but bad things to say about Hunter's Harrison and the PSR trains. And so there was an immediate connection there. But the next thing I know, Leslie's getting invited to ride the train over Kicking Horse Pass. And I said, I will drive.
No,
and
we
I'll-
both did.
Yeah, we don't then. I said no, I'd drive and I'd pick you up at Lake Louise. But you want to tell the rest of the story?
Yeah, so he said, so Daryl said, "Oh, come on up." No inward facing cameras at that time, and I said, "Oh yeah, sure, no problem." So we're talking and jawboning, the conductor, Daryl and I, yeah, and he goes, "Well, you're a hoghead. Sit down." So okay. So I sat down and he had me. So I got to ride the train. I got to operate the train from over the mountain, through the twin spiral tunnels, over Kicking Horse Pass. It was just so amazing. So cool. And so we were coming down the mountain, and I said, look, this is the hottest train on the railroad. I'm a rail. Don't bother stopping at Lake Louise Station. I'll just get off on the platform. Don't worry about it. He goes, no, I'll stop. I said, no, don't stop. He goes, well, okay, I'll have the conductor, watch you on the head end. I said, no problem. Well, little did I know that the Rocky Mountaineer was right behind us, and the platform was full of passengers waiting for the Rocky Mountaineer. So I'm climbing back down the ladder, ready to put my trailing foot down and properly get off the train. And I go to get off and I land onto the platform only to be face to face with about 15 passengers.
Who
So
all spread like the seas, so you didn't become a bowling ball.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it was pretty funny, but it was a great experience. It was really, and we're still in touch, Daryl and I.
All right, we'll move into the last section here. Some of our shots, there's about 10 of them, and I know we're running against time. I was 15 and visiting my cousin in Harrington Park, New Jersey, and he just expounded the virtues of the Penn Central and the River Line. And this was the first and only shot I got of a New York super van or flexi van train coming through Harrington Park doing 50, and that guy was bouncing, and I had to run. It scared the crap out of me. But little did I know, let's see, I was 15. In 7 years, I'd be running WV1 on my first trip along the same railroad. So
That's
pretty
funny.
interesting. And talk about smoke. This was an excursion train. I got a struck a viaduct in the mid 70s. Bruce Sturzing was the president and rail fan of the Delaware and Hudson, and loved the DNHPAs. So I got a shot of him leaving Starocca. The next shot I picked out pretty much for Elron. Again, that same trip where I got the super chief, we ended up down in Santa Bernardino shops. My dad had warned me about, doing the right thing, don't get into trouble. And here I find myself shaking in fright because I'm obviously trespassing in a shop that's closed for the weekend. But it's a memorable photograph, and I really enjoyed it, but I won't do that anymore. Les?
Well, speaking of trespassing, no, I asked for permission. Actually, this was in Chicago, obviously, pretty close to when I moved out west here, and I think it was about 10 degrees that morning, Sunday morning, and all the scoots were lined up, and I was like, yeah, let me go downtown and, kind of check things out. So there was a foreman there in the yard, with all the E's. And I said, hey, do you mind if I take some pictures around? And he said, well, be really careful. I said, no problem. I'm an engineer on the C&NW, and I know the protocol, and I'll be very, very safe. So he gave me carte blanche um, to photograph all the commuter trains and power, and I was very, very blessed, um, and I'm very, very glad I did.
This is one of my favorites because you can't repeat this.
No, you can't. This is
Leslie took this. That's not mine, but I
Yeah.
gotta tell the story.
Yeah,
real
no,
quick.
this was those of my former SP train dispatchers will know this. This, by the way, this was not against the rules at the time. That my Nikon was probably it was on the top of my grip, on every single locomotive I operated. But so we were coming back from Reno, and I'd ask the train dispatchers, I'd call them up, hey, what are the odds of you running us over the number one track? It's a really nice day, and I think it'd be really nice. We're ahead of time, and we're not late. Great day. The passengers, I think, would really enjoy it, and so they granted my request more times than not. And here is
One of the shots.
one of the shots,
Yeah.
and
Anyway,
I'm very, very, very
you
happy.
can't repeat that one.
You
too much
can't.
more.
No.
This is another shot that I have one very similar to this that I didn't include, but Les took this one at Spring Garden.
Yeah.
We love that one. And then
Yeah.
you were tooling around Taylor.
I was tootling around Taylor Yard, and in the late '70s, and this is a deadline, in Taylor Yard, and
So be it.
what can I say?
Yeah, no more. A lot can be said about the war bonnets. This just struck me as being a majestic, magnificent pose.
Yeah,
Leslie took coming around Tehachapi.
thank you.
Well, we know where most everything is. We're at a loss for this one. So maybe a title Lamka Chicago, because I can tell us, but it's on the
It's on the BM.
it's on the queue somewhere.
It's on the queue.
But all I can tell you was
in
taking
Iowa.
3:15 in the afternoon. But I just thought it was a very lovely picture with the caboose, as engine, local, and 2 auto parts cars.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that was, but
Yeah, actually, we don't label our stuff.
I
too
know
well.
we're very good.
Leslie took the one on the left of the Katy Y, and I took the one of an SV perishable train east of Cape Horn. Again, these are all more than 30 years ago, and we're all in our pretty much, well, you were an adult here, but I think I was still a teenager for that shot. And we're going to close with the one we opened with. And I gave this to Les as a gift because I'd recognized
Our
how
first
hard
Christmas.
how hard she had fought to become successful in the railroad industry, and really had to become a warrior. And I came up with that phrase, "Love immerses the soul in the warrior spirit rests," and that hangs in our living room today. So we'll conclude with that, and if there's time, Lisa or Elle, we can take questions. We'll bring up the rear with some cabooses.
Yeah, from Bentonville. Oh.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Thank you so much. That was just tremendous. Great, great fun.
Thank you.
I even recognize a few of those places. We have a lot of kind comments in the chat. I will share that with you guys later personally. We'll make sure you see what everyone has written. All kinds of wonderful comments. I think everyone's just had a delightful time. I don't think we have any actual questions, although there is a nice Q&A comment from Tim Johnson. Hey, Tim, from Southern California. who says, you two are so amazing, not just your beautiful photography, but your experience as well. You two are very blessed that you found each other.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes,
Tim.
we are. Thank you, Tim. Yeah.
And there are many other comments very similar to that. So I think the one question I would ask you is, you two have done so much and experienced so much. What is an operation or a place that you still have yet to visit that's on your list?
Well, we just got done with Nova Scotia.
Yeah, went connect Canada coast to coast. Yeah.
That's a hard
We,
one to top.
Yeah, yeah.
we love the Pacific Northwest, and we've taken the Canadian, we've taken it with Phil Ghazi and some friends, and then the Lexington group. We are going to work on maybe photographing British Columbia, because even though we've taken a train through there, we've never really done, we've done, obviously saw Alberta and Kiki Horse, but we've never been to Fraser River and some of those
Yeah,
places.
Kamloops
We really want
and-
to do that.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've done the Southwest, we've done so much. We haven't done the Northern Tier. We'd like to do the Northern Tier through Glacier and maybe to Havre and some of those places. Northern Michigan, not Michigan, Northern Minnesota, Duluth, we're contemplating.
The Copper Canyon in Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
At some point in time, we'd like to do that.
And the Southeast, of course, with the floods they've had there, a lot of the curves, I can't remember the name of it, out of Roanoke and Asheville we want to do, but that may never operate again. We'll have to see. But some of the places in the South, we did the Rat Hole not too long ago, but we'd probably like to do that again, Al.
Yeah, Alaska. We'd
Alaska.
like to get up there and do a deep dive in Alaska.
Well, I just saw a chat comment pop up from a Mr. Henry Posner III.
Hi, Henry.
And he's saying, what about Peru? I think he knows somebody there.
Maybe,
Right.
hey, we'd definitely be, we'd definitely be game for that.
Henry is our kind of our guidepost for international travel.
Yes,
So he will
yes.
definitely get a call from us when we decide to do that.
Yeah.
Well, a couple last questions popped up, so we'll get to them really quick.
Okay.
What is your favorite train spotting spot? And
The
that's
favorite
from John
train
Cowgill.
spotting. Try
John
again.
Cowgill. Hi, John.
What's our what?
Your favorite train spotting spot.
Train
Your
spot.
location, your favorite place to rail fan. What would be your favorite if you really had to pick one?
No,
Oh, God.
Columbia. I'd say right off the top of my head, Columbia River.
In the fall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gorge. I
And we haven't been back there in a while.
love it. Yeah, I love that.
I'm pretty partial to the desert Southwest, but I found Delize to sit up on top of the hill at Delize and watch those trains battle the grade come out of Berlin and then tip over the hill is a really cool spot. Les hasn't been out there too much, but Encino is a low spot on the Transcon between Negra and Vaughan. And even though it's nondescript,
I've been there.
I just enjoy sitting there and watching those trains come off that grade. And by the time they're going by, they're holding back 70. I mean, they're just, from just a train watching perspective, that's one of my places that I really enjoy.
Very nice. Let's see. Thomas Spangler asks, from your operations experience, do you have a favorite locomotive to run?
Oh, tunnel motors.
That's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah,
You're always partial to the ST40s too.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
pretty cool.
SC40-2s, you can't go wrong.
I
Yeah,
figured someone was going to ask them what we fight about.
yeah.
And I have my answer already. There's not a whole lot, but we're both sugar addicts. And there'll be a chocolate bar somewhere, and if I take one piece out of it, I'm brought on the carpet. She knows how many candy bars are in his house,
Where they are.
how much they weigh, and where they are.
That's right.
So I can't get by her on
That's right.
those.
That's right.
Oh, well, I have one last question from
Okay.
Steve Patterson.
Oh,
Hey,
okay, I
Steve.
see.
Bye, Steve.
And he's asking Leslie, working for 9 railroads, he's wondering about that job retention. He says, is there a story behind these short employments we ought to know?
Yeah, I can't
He's
keep a
pulling your
job.
leg.
Steve.
Well, Steve had
They all-
42 years, so I
Yeah,
think
yeah. Well,
that's
they all get merged and consolidated, you know?
Well, truthfully,
They're short lines.
I was going to mention this is that, when you're married and raising kids, that takes a huge time commitment. And the rail fan for both of us kind of went on the shelf. And that was a period of transition. I mean, I left a couple jobs, Conrail got merged. So there was situations in our lives where we couldn't necessarily stay, not because it was our choice, but through corporate relocations, marriage
Mergers,
issues,
consolidation.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Chip and Les, it's been just such a pleasure. Thank you
Oh,
so much for this presentation, all these wonderful photos, all the great stories. I think that's been the most fun of all. And
Yeah.
again, I think you're going to see the chat and see a lot of familiar names, and I even see my own wife Laura popping up in the chat.
Oh, hi, Laura.
I think we're honored to be included in your slide in the beginning.
Well,
Thank you.
oh,
We're
thanks.
honored to be friends. So,
Well, yeah, we are too, and we want to thank everybody that tuned in and all our friends and family, and we really appreciate your participation.
oh, absolutely. And I see Scott had Maureen watching with him. So
Oh,
see,
I
it's just
know.
there's a
I'm
lot of
Maureen.
couples out there.
Nice, nice.
Lisa, I don't know if I'm missing anything, but otherwise, if you'd like to wrap things up.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us. And Chip and Leslie, that was just amazing. Everything that I hoped for. So
Oh,
Great.
thank you
thank
for
you.
sharing your story with us. Just a quick reminder to everybody, don't forget to register for our March. Oh, there's Scott. Don't forget to join us for our next Zoom program on March 11th. And we'll hope to see all of you there. Thank you again, Chip and Leslie, and wishing everyone who attended a wonderful evening. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.